All right, Spidey fans, welcome to the Video Game Fight School channel. Thank you very much for tuning in. Let's talk a little bit about sales. Let's talk about some commerce, the financials around making these video games. This is a very huge aspect of my coverage for a lot of video games. Some of you know I cover Tom Clancy's The Division, and recently they announced The Division 3, and I remember I was one of the few in the community who was saying that there were financial, landmarks or benchmarks that indicated that this was going to happen. And then we got like this leak from Inside Gaming that, somebody in Ubisoft said there were no plans for Division 3. Next thing you know, we have a Division 3 actually officially in the works. I do this small, missive on this particular issue to say, if you consider the financial aspects that actually drives these games, I think it provides a better understanding. You can make a lot of very cool predictions overall because there are some things that will indicate to you what you might see. Now, in this particular video, we want to talk about the reality so far in regard to, say, possibly what we might see for sales for Marvel Spider-Man 2. Marvel Spider-Man 2 is an interesting game. It's going to do very well, in my opinion. I think sales are going to be interesting. They're going to be fantastic. But there is a conundrum, or I would say a question at least, that we ought to ask ourselves. And that is, even though Starfield and this game are two different games, is Marvel Spider-Man 2 going to be able to pull off the numbers in the period of time that will, in a sense, match 10 million players that Starfield has seen? I get it. Game Pass opened up the door and has afforded more players to be able to get their hands on a game like Starfield for very little compared to, say, Spider-Man, which is going to be a full-fledged title at a full price at launch. So that's pretty much what I want to make sure that we're putting in this particular, conversation so that we don't go ahead and mix things up. Now, if you actually consider that, you have to also go ahead and say, okay, if you're looking at, say, PlayStation's high-performing titles in short periods of time, I guess that's where we have to actually make, the comparisons and see if we can judge that, Spider-Man 2 is going to meet these numbers. Now, here's a few, here are a few things that I think are quite interesting. Number one, Marvel Spider-Man 2 doesn't seem to have received the amount of marketing that the first Spider-Man 2018 game actually got. Now, I can understand that it is actually not necessary to have done that. The game already has brand recognition. Everyone who played the first game, at least at this point, must have been looking forward towards a second game and, would have at least known about Miles Morales in the middle. So already the game is marketing itself. So it just didn't seem like spending a lot of money on the marketing would have really made sense. However, seeing the way, Game Pass is providing, in my opinion anyways, what I think is a huge incentive to gamers to play their first party and even some third party games they won, I would expect that Sony would have actually ramped up the marketing for this game as much as they did. Now, let's put a few things in perspective. When I say this, I'm not saying it lightly. And if you think about the Spider-Man 2018 game, at the time, PlayStation took a 90-second spot at a Super Bowl to actually advertise Marvel Spider-Man 1. They had a lot of creative advertising medium that they used, but I think that Super Bowl spot was indicative of exactly their commitment to wanting to market that game like crazy. One being the fact that they spent, all this money for a 90-second spot. I think it cost like, somewhere around $4 to $5 million to, get a 30-second spot, and they went ahead and they went all the way for 90 seconds. Can you imagine that? So they could put the game in front of everybody that they possibly could. So these are a few things that are in a sense indicative as to how things are going to go. Another aspect too is, since the PlayStation 4 generation, where we had multiple millions of copies of, or I would say units of PlayStation, it seemed like it was almost ubiquitous in a sense that PlayStation just had all these consoles. So selling games on the PlayStation 4 didn't seem to need too much effort. In regard to the PlayStation 5, we have not seen those sales mature or manifest yet. Right now, the PlayStation 5 is the higher seller among the Xbox and the PS5 in terms of series and, those two. But the PS5 has not reached those levels at the time of the release of the Marvel Spider-Man 2 game. So this is pretty much what you're going to have to, take into consideration. Because I mean, at the end of the day, when you think about it, you kind of need the units to be able to sell a game that's going to be an exclusive. So that's another aspect where the exclusive, I would say circumstance is going to be a factor that we have to point out, because again, Starfield in its own I would say environment or circumstance did not necessarily have those restrictions. In fact, somebody was like, to that 10 million, how are you finding the game? And if you've tried both PC or Xbox for best experience, this is the first game I've considered getting Game Pass again. So thanks for the feedback. Glad you all seem to be enjoying it. So the PC side, this is where Game Pass has another interesting set of platforms or I would say gaming devices, I wouldn't say consoles, to be able to go ahead and boost their numbers. And with Marvel Spider-Man probably not getting a PC, or Spider-Man 2, sorry, not getting a PC version for a while, I think this is also something that you must pay very close attention to. So when we actually break it all down with the circumstances that we saw with the 2018 game and the circumstances that we're seeing right now, I don't think Marvel Spider-Man 2 is actually going to receive or enjoy the exposure and the sales that the first game actually did enjoy. It's because these circumstances seem to kind of, in a sense, hinder the game overall. And I say this not as a way to bash anybody. I'm just saying that as a sequel, the sales would have probably required a lot more in terms of a marketing push to be able to get the game that far. And again, the first game did such good numbers. It's not a matter of, say, like Ragnarok, where, it was quite interesting and so on and so forth. I'm talking about the game is literally the highest selling superhero game at the moment. So, and for being an exclusive, it's quite impressive. And when you go ahead and you factor in all the other aspects, it's just, very interesting to see. Now, is the game possibly going to receive over a longer period of time, good sales? I think that's likely, but it's going to be interesting to see how the numbers stack up at launch and how everything actually, works itself out. But anyways, I wanted to go ahead and talk about this aspect of the game and talk about my predictions. And, again, if I were to throw out a number there as to how many copies I think we're going to be able to see in like the first month of the game, I'm thinking we're going to see a good million, not a few million, a good multiple millions in terms of, maybe 4 or 5 million in the first month in regard to sales, maybe even more, to be very honest with you guys. The question, though, is, also that huge number that the first game got, when we're going to be able to see something like that, or if we're going to be able to see something like that, just because this year has already been saturated with a lot of video games. I do know there are a lot of people looking forward to playing this game nonetheless anyways. But I would love to hear your thoughts in the comment section. I want to hear what you think about, this whole, numbers and sales and so on and so forth, what we might be seeing and how you approach it. At the end of the day, though, you'll be playing the game if you're playing the game, or you won't play the game if you're not playing the game. But, again, it's just something that I'm really interested in talking about, and I've been talking about for a while with many other video games. Thanks for watching. Appreciate you guys so much. Hopefully we'll talk pretty soon in another one. Peace out.